Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. I am joined by Aaron Bart, who I've known for a year, 2 years, Aaron? I don't remember.
Yeah.
And we're going to be talking about his journey, but there's some going to be really interesting stuff in here for you guys who are building out what you're doing in your business on LinkedIn. And Aaron's got a really interesting journey that I think actually will add a lot of value to you guys. So, Aaron, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for inviting me. It's nice to be here.
So, I guess let's just kind of start with we'll kind of go. Yeah, I met you as you were kind of focusing more on LinkedIn, but what was your backstory before you kind of went, do you know what, I'm really going to use this platform? What was your story to that point?
Yeah, good question. So I come from ad agency background. I'm a designer by trade, and I've worked as first just an individual contributor as a designer, and then I was given a team of designers to manage and a team of motion graphics artists, and I was basically thrown in at an ad agency, and they said, now you're a manager, now you're in a leadership role. I had no training. No one showed me how to do that. And so I just figured it out, and I ended up being pretty good at that. And so after about 15 years of working at ad agencies in the US, mostly in the Bay Area and San Francisco and Oakland, I really just started to burn out on that. It wasn't for me. I just was not passionate about what I was doing anymore. But at the same time, I was now in a senior leadership role at a large agency running a 50, 60 person creative organization. And I had spoken to a bunch of friends who left corporate and started doing coaching. And I said to myself, that feels like something I could do and that I want to do. And so I pivoted to leadership coaching, basically taking my experience in a leadership role, having learned or self-taught how to be a senior leader, and brought that into an individual coaching practice that initially getting referrals from other agencies. Was I was in some ways like just leveraging what I had already done and put that together in these programs to coach other leaders. So that's how
So
that started.
that kind of agency world can be pretty crazy. It's pretty intense, right?
Yes.
And the other thing about that, like the goalposts are difficult with kind of agency projects. So, things never quite are the same. There's lots of pressure. And that seems quite a big shift to go from that kind of world to coaching. I know what you were doing, managing teams,
Yeah.
but still you've got that kind of pressure of, campaigns to do, changes. That's quite a change of pace, right?
Yeah, it is, and it was. And I prefer this way of working. I do sometimes miss working with teams, but I think for me, in this stage of my life, I have two kids. I'm feeling like I want a little bit more of the peace and less of the chaos and stress of agency life. And I think it's similar in the UK, but in the US, ad agencies, you're working 10, 12-hour days, and sometimes clients really don't appreciate that at all. And the people on the team also feel that stress. And a lot of my job as a leader on these teams was dealing with individual with burnout, with team drama, with people just feeling the stress of that type of work environment. And that's a lot of what I bring into my coaching work as well.
So you jump ship, you go, right, I'm going to do this. You've got referrals. And how does that work? How does that work as a business? What did you do? Because obviously you're on LinkedIn, you're promoting on LinkedIn, but
Yeah,
how did you find that journey? I'm assuming you've not
yeah.
got gazillions in the bank and you need to kind of earn a living at the same time. What was that transition like?
Yeah, initially I did get referrals because I have a lot of connections in the agency space. And when I put it out there that this is what I'm doing, I had people that I knew coming to me saying, "Hey, we have a team of, 8 or 10 account leaders at my agency, and they're kind of junior. They need training in strategic thinking, or a lot of times it's communication, relationship management. these they're really like kids. They're in their 20s and sometimes early 30s, and they're managing these huge accounts. And it only takes one incident, one time that someone drops a ball, and a huge client can leave. And that's a big amount of that's a monthly recurring revenue that an agency loses. And so the pain point for the agency is client retention. And so the problem I'm solving there is I'm training these new leaders how to be better at the things that are going to help retain clients. And so I got a lot of referrals through my connections, but then I realized that that wasn't sustainable. So I really needed to, on my own, figure out a way to attract clients. And that's when I found you actually through working with Steve on the LinkedIn training. And I was able to make that work for myself and to attract people who I didn't know initially, but they liked my content. And I started conversations with them on LinkedIn. I would just DM them, I would follow, really do all the things that you offer in your training. If you do all those things, people are going to come to you and you're going to close clients. And so that's what I did. And that's where I'm at now. I'm using LinkedIn to get new coaching clients.
So what do you reckon the hardest bit of that kind of journey onto LinkedIn was for you? Or what do you
The
reckon,
hardest, yeah.
or what are some of the more difficult things for people maybe to get their head round about using LinkedIn?
I think for me, and I don't know if this is true for everyone, when I first when I first pivoted from agency work that I had been doing for most of my career to something very different, I really had to figure out almost what do I want? What do I want to do? What do I want to do with it? Because I realized that I could get referrals for different types of coaching work, and I did. And right now, I'm actually getting career coaching clients. I'm leveraging work that I've done in leadership coaching to do more executive coaching. People who are already in senior leadership roles who want to be promoted, how to present themselves, coaching on how to have executive presence, that kind of thing. So it's becoming this blank canvas for me. And I think when I first started, I had to really ask myself, what do I want to do? What do I like to do? If I could do anything with this platform, if I could do anything I wanted and succeed, I mean, LinkedIn is just a platform and it's going to amplify anything that you choose to do with it. So I really had to ask myself first, what do I want? What do I want to do? What are the problems that I want to solve? And once I was able to do that, I was able to really step in it fully. And the content that I post and the content that people post on content that people post, when it's authentic, people see that. And when people aren't sure what they want to do, that comes through. And so I think for me, I had to really get clear on what do I want to do? Why do I want to do it? What am I passionate about? And that was the biggest thing for me. And once that's clear, once you have clarity on that vision for yourself, everything else falls into place.
It's interesting because we were talking earlier about a lot of the challenges people have on LinkedIn are not really LinkedIn problems. And I think I said this on a live this morning. Like, if you think about it, that dilemma, like you said, if you're kind of going, what do I want to do? And you're not settled, you've not settled that, that comes out in your everything you're doing, your communication. It's like an unwritten doubt that's threaded through. And interestingly, if you swap out the platform, we probably talk about the same things. You probably talk about the same things in your coaching as I do in mine, which is like you got to really know who's your target audience. You're probably in career coaching saying you got to really know where you want to go.
Yeah, yeah,
It's weird how we think of it as a tech platform, but actually the bigger issues to get the best out of it are nothing to do with the platform.
yeah. I agree 100%. And I think in some ways, my experience with LinkedIn and my experience with anything in this journey, it's really just helping to magnify and amplify that process of figuring that out. One of the things I do with all of my coaching clients, especially the career coaching clients, you're right, is I have them write. Just start writing for themselves. And through that writing process, a lot of the stuff will come out. A lot of the figuring out who you want to be in your career journey or what you want to do, what you're passionate about, who you want to help. Just start writing about it and find your voice through that and find your your career path and the things that you want to do. And once that's clear, people are going to flock to you. If you can articulate that for yourself, you can articulate that for your target audience, it's going to resonate. And if you're going on ChatGPT to come up with ideas, if you're going to, to Gemini or Chat or AI to generate content for you on LinkedIn, which so many people are doing, and it all sounds the same, and people can see through that, it's not going to resonate the way someone who's passionate about whatever it is they're doing when they write on LinkedIn, that's
Yeah.
going to resonate with their target.
I love AI. I know you love AI, but the issue with AI replacing people, I think, is what's happening right now on LinkedIn. And I think LinkedIn's kind of caused it because when AI came out, they kind of encouraged people, hey, look, you can rewrite posts with AI. And of
Yeah.
course, now people are. It's like we can tell.
Yeah. And AI cannot replicate, you can't manufacture that authentic sense, that feeling, and people can smell it from a mile away. And so if you want to be successful, I think if you want to be successful in anything, you just have to be honest with yourself. Even when I was still at these big agencies and I was having my one-on-ones with my team, with my creative directors who I'm still friends with, was struggling with what am I doing here? Helping to work through those questions. Just, what do you want to do? What's the next step? Whatever you can do, whoever you can talk to help figure those issues out, that's what's going to help propel your career or move you through life in a positive way.
And just thinking about, because you do a lot of career coaching, leadership coaching, what's your sense of, and this is just something I see at the moment, the trickiness of trying to make decisions when the world is now moving a hell of a lot quicker. Like since AI, if you think about it,
Yeah.
AI came along and now most of us use it every day. We're not really sure where it's going to go next. Like nobody saw Amazon coming in the .com boom. We saw it as a bookshop. Now we kind of depend on Amazon. It's really hard to operate in that space where things can change so quickly. And that coping with change right now seems like it feels like we've had years of constant change. How do you pick a career or make decisions in that kind of space where
That's a great
there's
question.
no like there's no facts to say do this or do that?
Personally, and this is something I share with my kids as well, I think the answers to that are internal and not external because I think there's always change. My parents talk about all the big things that were happening in their era. I think if you're able to filter out the noise, I mean, there's noise about AI in the early 2000s. There was, noise about search, about Google, about Amazon, about e-commerce, and everyone wanted it.
We were all going to be wearing augmented reality visors 2 years ago. Do you remember?
Yeah.
We'll all be on sofas living in a virtual world. What happened to that?
What happened to that? Yeah, good question. We moved on to the next thing. And I think anyone who was able to, at any point in that technology, in that trend, if you can jump on that and come up with an idea or figure out what you enjoy about it or what you want to do with it that's valuable, that's going to add value to other people that are going to pay for it, you can be successful if that's what you want to do. I think what I'm saying is you ask how do you make those decisions. I think the thing is to just look internally and just to be still and quiet and figure out what do you want in it and try to filter out the noise because there has been a lot of noise about AI and it's evolved very quickly. But if you slow things down and you just see here's what's happening, here's the technology. I don't need to learn everything there is to learn about AI right now. I don't need to I mean you want to learn about what's out there. You want to have some sense, but you don't need to feel about the decision about what should I do because everyone else is doing it. No, what do you want to do and what's available to you given the journey of the technology, the journey that you're on in your career. So I think people just need to sort of take a step back and say, there's a lot of noise out there, and we're also we're tapped into it more because of social media. Like there's just so much amplification of everything that's happening out there. So it does feel like it's moving quickly.
Yeah. And I think it's impossible. It's impossible to keep up because there's so many applications, so many different uses. But I think one thing that's really interesting for me, and I'd love your take on this, when social media came out, the promise of social media was it would connect us with the world, and it certainly has done that. And there's a whole lot of unintended consequences of that connection. There's, the rise of cyberbullying and trolling and all that kind of stuff. But one of the biggest things that's come out of it is, despite being able to reach everybody through, social media, our phones, we actually, as a people, feel less connected to people, and generally speaking. And that's probably going to be worse for some generations than others. But also, I think that everybody's worried about AI taking jobs. And I want to kind of linger on this because of the career piece.
Yeah.
But I also think there's going to become some incredibly talented human jobs. And by that, I mean a, a craving or a desire for the ultra human skills. And I don't mean just, oh, AI can't do this. I mean like storytelling. I
Yes.
mean like the soft skills, as they call them. Um, is that me just theorizing, or it just feels like there's going to be this ultra human movement at the same time as AI?
I think that's already happening. I think there is a huge need for those social skills, those in-person social skills. I wouldn't even call them soft skills. Social media, you're right. When social media first introduced, when, it was MySpace and then Facebook. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when it was Friendster. And back in those
I've never
days,
heard of that.
yeah, Friendster.
I remember AOL chat.
Well, this is like early 2000s. There were some platforms that kind of came and went, but in those days, social media was a way to it was an add-on to human interaction. You were doing it with your friends, with people you already knew. You were finding people on Facebook from high school, from college that you already had a connection with. Family, friends that you can now share photos with, that, it was a way to just augment your existing in real life social ecosystem. And now it's becoming just you're interacting with people just on social media. You're connecting with people on Instagram because you want to build your followers. You want to get that dopamine hit when you post, and it doesn't matter if you know them in real life or not. So I think, and again, like I think younger generations who are growing up more and more with that model where they're on their phones more. They're on their phones a lot more even now than doing things in real life having that real human interaction. And I think it's a shame because yeah, we're not learning those social skills as much. Young kids and teens are not really having those experiences that we had when we were kids of just going out after dinner and playing in the street and riding bikes and doing those things that really formed those human connections that now in the workspace, in a career, are really important for, like when I have a client and I start with a client, the first thing I do is I ask questions and I listen. And you have to be a really good listener if you want to take in the information that's going to be needed to have a successful coaching experience to really help solve their problem. If you can't be a good listener, if you don't have the skills to interact socially with someone, you're not going to succeed in the way that you really need to. And I think a lot of people are missing those basic social skills of connecting with someone, of looking at someone and saying, here's a human being. They have triggers and frustrations and buying motivations that I need to understand as a coach, as a business. How do I listen to them? How do I talk to them in a way that helps me understand what they're going through so that I can offer a service or a product that they're going to want to pay for?
And I guess that is that is the challenge, isn't it? Whilst being connected to the world, how do you, if we go really deep and meaningful, right? How do you know yourself? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, let's say, like you're in your 40s and you're like, do you know what? I want to do something new. Like, if you've done, maybe your scenarios here a little similar. There's a time when like you're you know that you don't want to do what you're currently doing, but you kind of don't know what's next, or you're not sure what's next. And I think that kind of self-awareness becomes really critical, not just like social media, forces you to be in the moment, all the time,
Yeah.
and just jump on trends. You can kind of lose yourself in that. And the same with a career. If you've done something for a long time, you can kind of lose yourself in that career and go, I don't really know what's next, but you know that this bit's over.
Yeah.
How do you kind
Yeah.
of get to
That's
that?
That's a great question, and I run into that a lot. That's a very common feeling, a very common place that people arrive at. They're like, I know that this is done, but I don't know what's next. And in the coaching work I do, both the leadership coaching, career coaching, the executive coaching work, I do what's called a values mapping exercise. And it's a really simple exercise, but it really just helps to it's called purpose mapping or values mapping, where you basically have a list of values and you write down what are your values, and then you start to prioritize them. Sometimes you can say, if you could only choose one value, what would it be? And it really just leads people back to what's important. What are values that are important to you in a career, in life, really? Is it integrity? Is it creativity? Is it social interaction? What are the things that are really important to you? And if you could just start thinking about those and ranking them or prioritizing them or thinking about them in terms of like, this is what's really important, then you can start to figure out a way back to, okay, now I can help steer myself to that decision about what's next. And that's a lot of what I help people do in the initial stages of my coaching practice.
This might be, I might get in trouble for saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. So, somebody approached me for a job, um, and maybe I'll get hated on for this, but it was just, sometimes you just have to go with what you feel. And they worked for a company for about 10 years. But then since 2020, some of it being the pandemic, they basically had so many different jobs, like more than one a year. So in 5 years, it was I think about seven jobs. So some of them were like 3 months, then 9 months, then one a year and 2 months and stuff. And when I looked at that CV, I saw a really potentially competent person, but I also saw somebody who hadn't found their place. And I couldn't hire them because I wasn't sure that we were their place either. But I think there's a lot of people like in that space where maybe they have moved around a little bit. And you see it on LinkedIn quite a bit, people looking for jobs quite often. And maybe I'm just too old fashioned now, but I think you still should try and find a home. If you want to work for somebody else, you should find a home for a few years at least. But I think there's a lot of people that go round on LinkedIn and they're 9 months here and 15 months here. And they're actually looking for something, but don't know what they're looking for. Because I don't know. Is it a thing that people just change jobs that infrequent? Because let me just say my piece. I think the first year you're really understanding the role, and your second year you're kind of really flying in the role. That's really what I've always seen. It takes you like 2 years to really own a role. But it does feel like there's a lot of people now moving around really quickly. What's your
Yeah.
what's your thoughts on it?
I agree. I see that too. I work with a lot of people who leave jobs and go to the next thing and find that it's not for them. I think there are a few reasons why that happens with different individuals. I think there are also different careers where it's more common to move around. I think sales roles, there's, people who are in sales might find themselves, hired by someone who just needs a biz dev guy for a few months, or they they think they need someone who's a closer and it turns out that they're not. I think there's a lot of volatility in certain industries and in certain roles that accounts for that. And then I think people who are younger and earlier in their careers are still figuring out what they want to do. And so because there's opportunity, people will join a company or an organization and thinking that that's where they want to be, and then they learn that it's not, or they join for what they think are the right reasons. It's an attractive title, it's good money, but then the company culture isn't quite for them. And so I think people just go through career figuring these things out, like you said. And no, I don't think it's any real fault of their own. It's just a journey. It's just a figuring out. And I think when you and I were starting out in our careers, it was less common to do that. I think there was less opportunity. And there were also not as many, there weren't these platforms to find new jobs. It took a lot longer to find a new role. And now, because it's so easy to find a new role, and there are so many startups and so many smaller to medium sized companies that are hiring, it's a lot easier to jump around. And so I think people are just doing that more because it's available and it's a way for them to figure out what they want to do.
My first proper job, shall we say, as they say, my first proper job, the internet didn't exist. And now, like, everybody's worried about the AI on the internet that could be
Yeah.
replacing them.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's got to be a degree of settling down of that. I know the pandemic exacerbated it, but I think for me, maybe I'm old school, right? Maybe I'm old school, right? If I see somebody who's had a run of 9 months, 9 months, 9 months, I have to, when hiring, think I might be the next 9 months. Do you know what I mean? Which is
Yeah.
fine if you're like, you can pick up the job and do the job and it's all good. But if you're kind of like, I don't know, hiring a content writer or a project manager, that kind of 9 month run kind of would make me nervous because I'm like, we're going to invest in this person. They're going to interact with our clients. They're going to do all this kind of stuff. And then basically, by the time everybody's familiar with them, we've settled into a routine, they're leaving. But if it was like, I've got a coffee shop, for an example, on the other side, that doesn't really matter to me at all because they come in, they know how to work the machines, they serve customers. I guess it's different for different industries,
It is.
but I on the kind of my side of my day job, shall we say, I'm a bit more looking for people to hang around a bit longer. I don't know.
Well, yeah,
It's a
because you're
trickle.
you're you're trying to build something, Dean. I mean, I think what you're doing at Maverick, and I think what any agency owner really wants to do. And I was actually just speaking a few weeks ago with the former CEO and the co-founder of VQ Digital, where I was for a long time. That's what he was trying to do. He was trying to build something and invest in people who he knew would be there for a long time, and build an agency. I mean, it turned out to be very successful for him because he was able to really build a valuation, make it profitable, and build a valuation and sell it for a lot of money. But I don't think a lot of, not just agency owners, but a lot of people who are building companies these days have that vision. And I think what you're doing at Maverick and bringing people in who you want to be there and building a culture. And I think culture is so important. And I think people overlook it. They say culture eats strategy for breakfast. It's true. It's a big part of what makes the success of a lot of companies, especially agencies and brands that want to work with agencies that have a definable culture that they agree with. Because a lot of the things that agencies do these days, I mean, you're doing LinkedIn training. I mean, to be quite frank, there are a lot of agencies in the UK and the US that do the same thing. When I was at these performance marketing agencies, these growth marketing agencies, yeah, you could hire a media manager, someone who can set up your Meta ads manager and run it and pull reports and report to clients. Like, you could hire people like that pretty easily. But to have someone stay and learn how to solve problems and how to dig deeper into a client's long-term strategy and not just solve the how do we optimize the channel? But how do we optimize revenue across multiple channels? How do we build creative that's compelling for audiences beyond what we think is our target and build that into our product positioning? How do we solve problems? And I think that's what culture does. And I think that's what you're doing at Maverick. You're building an agency that's doing more than just training people how to be successful on LinkedIn.
I think the lessons, it was one of the most difficult lessons I've learned in building Maverick, and this kind of leads to what you do, is we've been doing this for a long time, but it's been mainly, people have grown in the business. So when just before the pandemic, everybody had worked with each other for 3+ years at least. And then the pandemic came along, and of course, at that point, we had this scenario where LinkedIn got more attention because people weren't in the office, you couldn't ring them up, all that kind of stuff. So suddenly LinkedIn became a thing. I'll just tell you a funny story here for a minute before we get into it. I was in a workshop, and you know how there's some people who believe like the pandemic was like engineered like by governments and things like that, right? Well, I was in a workshop and said, oh, LinkedIn's changed since the pandemic, and I opened a can of worms, and they basically believed that LinkedIn was involved in engineering the pandemic because they would make so much money and have made a lot of money and growth from the platform because of the pandemic. And I was like, really? LinkedIn engineered a global pandemic just to make up some money? It was interesting getting out of that conversation. But anyway, the point was LinkedIn, everybody paid attention to LinkedIn, and we grew massively as a business. And people were just contacting us saying, we need you, we need you, we need you. It was like unbelievable. But at the same time, one of the things that we did was we were hiring people, and we really didn't have a plan of how to deal with those people, how to manage those people. And the people we had never managed people. And that changed our culture as a business. And it changed the people as well. People who were really great to work with started getting a little bit snappy. Things like that started to happen. But also for me, I had a moment where I went, this is not the business I wanted. And it felt like the beast had taken its own, it become a beast that was going its own way and a juggernaut. And we had to have a real brutal moment where we sat down and said, stop. We're going almost backwards a little bit. We're going to deliberately go backwards because in this craziness, we have lost something. And it wasn't a kind of like, it just happened. With growth, that actually all this opportunity comes your way that you've worked for and you've been preparing for and marketing for and building brand for, and then it comes your way and you're not ready for what it does to you.
Yeah.
I guess that's probably an agency thing that happens too, because
Yes.
a lot of agencies will, it's like feast and famine with agencies often. You get, we just want a deal and we need to now hire 10 people to do that. How have you dealt with that situation in the past where you've had that kind of crazy growth, but now you've got culture taking its own course, management taking its own course?
Yeah, it's a common phenomenon. You're right. Growth does lead to that. I mean, it's a double-edged sword. You want to grow. Growth is desired, but culture changes and things break. And I think the first thing is just to notice it. I think to notice when that's happening. And for people in the C-suite, for people in senior leadership roles at these agencies, at these organizations, to understand that that's happening and to understand how that's impacting their agency and what they want to do about it. Now, obviously, when you're getting a new client and you're hiring and everything is just moving a mile a minute, you're literally building the plane as you're flying it, so to speak. It's really hard to notice those things. So I think what's important, and a lot of times this comes from HR, it comes from people in the C-suite, people in the leadership roles who want to take care of the agency, of the people, of the culture. They'll slow things down and they'll say, this is what's important right now. Yeah, we want to win new business, but we also want to continue and either shift to something more not human, but hire people who both can fill the roles and can do the jobs, but also who more fit with the culture and the direction of what we want to do. And also just notice that, people are burning out or people are working on things that they are a little bit outside of their wheelhouse. Those kinds of things just need to be addressed. So my opinion is that when those kinds of things start to happen in that growth period at an agency, or really any company, that you just have to notice it and leadership has to address it. And leadership has to listen to everyone at the agency. And I think putting out surveys and asking questions and getting people together and getting people to, and it's hard, very hard when everyone is remote, but there are ways to do that, to bring people together, to say, let's talk about something that's not work right now and figure out, what's the next thing for us.
And, you say surveys. That's one of the things we did.
Yeah.
And I didn't like the survey answers. And I was like, because there was things on there that I didn't see. But then when somebody said them, and because we were growing so fast, because there was a whole load of new people in the mix who didn't have that direct communication, because the communication changed as well. There was a couple of things in there that was said that was just like, that cut a little bit. But then as somebody pointed it out to me, because you're running a million miles an hour, I was like, I see it. But I didn't see it until it was pointed out to me. And we just had to go, right, stop. We're going to stop things here. We're going to go backwards a little bit. And we're going to set some new things in place. And it was difficult because we'd let things go. We were doing all right. The clients were happy. We were retaining business, all of it. But the way the business was functioning just wasn't great in the way I didn't like the way it was doing it. So we had to go backwards a bit. And then it was kind of harder because we had to reverse things, habits that had developed. And it took us 2 years. It took us 2 years to kind of get back to the place we wanted to be.
So let me ask you, Dean, when you sent that survey out and you got responses that you said you didn't like, I mean, you were hearing what people were thinking and saying and feeling. So you were just hearing what was real, but you said you didn't like it. Why didn't you like that?
Because it was my baby, and I would never want somebody to feel like that way in my baby, working in my baby business. That's number one. But also, it wasn't the kind of business I wanted to develop. I've worked in environments that are kind of a little bit not very nice. And I enjoyed the work and eventually, moved out of those because I didn't like the way they worked. And I saw some of the, not massive, probably I'm making a storm out of a teacup a little bit, but for me, it was a big deal. But I saw some of the beginning signs of those things that I didn't like in the companies I'd worked with and for. And it was like, how did we get here? So I could talk about this for ages, but I might get in trouble if I talk about it too much.
Well, I just think it's interesting. It's an interesting moment and something to look at, that when something bothers you in that way, to look at that and to see, well, that's not comfortable. That's an uncomfortable moment for me. And you took that and you said, okay, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to, you said go back. I mean, I think it's, in some ways, it feels like going back, but you're moving forward into something that is more along the lines of what you want and what you want to create. Because you're right, it is your baby.
Well, we felt like the baby was coming a bit of a tearaway teenager and needed reining in.
Yeah. Well,
but it wasn't like one person. It was like a system that had evolved to kind of create this runaway train.
Yeah.
Well, we got to wrap up. I want to do a part 2 on this because I think we can talk about this a bit more. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to share your socials with this. I'm going to tag you wherever I put these videos and go and check out what Aaron's up to. If you've experienced some of the stuff, maybe you're in that career journey and you're not sure where to go, or maybe you're experiencing that kind of, you're adding more people to the team and you want to make sure that the baby you're building or it goes the right way, go drop Aaron a line. Go drop Aaron a line and have a chat to him because he's done it for a lot of people and helped people in that place a lot. Awesome. Aaron, any last thoughts? Where's the best way to reach you? LinkedIn, right?
Can find me on LinkedIn. And I think for now, just LinkedIn. I am on all other social platforms, but those are more private, more for friends and family.
LinkedIn's the one.
Yes.
Awesome. Aaron, you're a star. Thanks for coming on, and
Thanks for
go
having
check
me.
out
It's
Aaron.
great to, thank you. It's great to chat with you.